I want to come and talk to you about when your enemy tries to break your spirit and try to get into your head. How to deal with an enemy who is just cruel, unrelentless. So Job 42:10, it says, "And the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before." So I want you to listen very closely to Job story, because in it you will find the answer that you need. So Job was a man of integrity. Job was a man who did right before the public, and a man who did right privately with his family and with his friends. He was a man who walked upright, a man who feared God and lived right. But Job, regardless of being a good person, he began to go through a long season of just hardship. The thing he feared the most began to happen to Job. The thing that he dreaded, the thing he didn't want, he wouldn't wish on an enemy, started to happen to him. Now, Job was a very merciful man, a very kind man, a man who looked out for other people, to the point where Job would intercede, or what we know, spiritual people, Christians know as interceding, also means pray. So Job would pray for his friends, his loved ones. In the case they sinned, he was praying for them. This is just how considerate this person is. He had a kind heart. Job was a saint. He was a good person. But regardless of the goodness of Job, in the spirit realm, there was a discussion about Job. The devil was saying, "Hey, I bet you, God, if you get rid of all the goodness you're doing for Job, I bet you he'll curse you to your face." And God was saying, "No, Job is really a good person. Deep down, Job is really a good person." And it's the same way many of us, for some reason, people might see you and they don't like you. They think either you're a goody two shoes or whatever it is. That's fine. The devil doesn't believe, but the fact is, God really do have good people out there. But anyhow, Job 42:10 says, "And the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before." So Job started to go through a season of hardship where he lost everything. When I say everything, I mean everything. Job lost his kids. Job lost his property. Job lost his wealth, his way to make wealth. Job lost everything that was good. Job even lost the love of his wife. Job lost his friends. They became enemies. And Job even lost his own countenance, his features. Job lost just his beauty, everything that was admirable about Job. Job lost it to the point where Job was covered in boil. Even his very skin got attacked. Job lost everything that you could look in a man's life and say was good, or anything that was good in Job's life got touched. Every single thing. But Job, regardless of all of this happening, Job still upheld his integrity. Job still held on to his character that, hey, I'm a good person, and no matter what the circumstance or situation, I'm still going to trust God, and I'm still going to be a good person. He still upheld his honor. And that's what a lot of storms come in our life, and it's to test and see, are you going to switch to the other side? Are you going to turn from God with all the stuff going on in your life? And Job, in one of the final tests of Job, instead of his friends who became enemies, because they were supposed to come around. Most people have friends, and we expect that they would do for us what we would do for them. We think, okay, so I'm here for you as a good person. But when it's your trial, when Job came through his trial, instead of them being a friend through the trial, they in fact condemned Job. They got to the point where they were telling Job, you deserve what you went through. You did something, and God is punishing you for what you did. So the enemy upped the attack, being that, he took his kids. He did all this other stuff to Job. the house, the cattle, every single thing, all his wealth got taken. Even the wife came around and said, curse God and die. With all of this stuff, these friends, the enemy upped the attack to the point where, being that he couldn't get Job outwardly, physically, he tried to get Job mentally. He tried to get in Job's mind. And that's the same thing too with how the enemy work. The enemy, being when they can't break you physically, when they can't intimidate you, when they can't cause you to quit on God and give up and switch sides, the enemy tries to get on the inside to make you begin to question your identity, begin to question why you've been doing good, and try to make you say, you know what? This hasn't given me anything. This being a good person hasn't profited me anything. Might as well I stop, you know? Sometimes because of this is where a lot of people change and switch lanes. But this is the place where Job decided, you know what? They don't deserve my prayer. They don't deserve me interceding on their behalf. These are the very people who are trying to break me, trying to, get in my head, trying to do things, conspire, manipulate, lie on my character. But regardless, I am going to do good for them. And this is the expectation that God wants for all of us as his children. He wants us to bless those that curse us and despitefully use us. He wants us to bless them. Job 42:10 says, and the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. So the whole story, the whole bad season that Job was going through, only began to change when Job began to pray for the very people who betrayed him, conspired against him, the very people who condemned him, the very people who were trying to get in his head, the very people who were trying to send Job to an early grave. Job began to pray for them. And no, he didn't pray, oh God, this, that to them, destroy it. No, Job prayed for them. He prayed for them, God's mercy on them. Because surely God's judgment was coming. But God, seeing Job was a good man going through what he's going through, and it was God's will for Job to go through this trial, and Job, his season for it, and yet these people wanted to put their mouth on Job while he's going through. And this is why, too, you got to be so careful. Everybody is not the same. There are God's people, and you have to be very, very careful with what you do to them, say about them, and how you treat them. God saw that Job's heart was good towards them, and Job began to pray mercy for them. And in doing this, the enemy know there's nothing else you can do. God turned the captivity. God blessed Job with twice as much as he had before. Twice as much as he had before. So yes, he lost children, he lost a lot of things, but what Job gained back, twice as much. So for somebody, this is what you do. Do good. When they go low, go high. Go high. Pray for your enemies. God bless.